When the pale winter sun finally rose over Ashford, Minnesota, it turned the entire town into a painting of silver and white. Snow clung to rooftops, pine trees, fence posts, and the frozen lake behind Walter Hayes's house. The storm had passed, but the world still looked as if it were holding its breath. Inside the little white house by the lake, however, something had changed. For the first time in years, Walter Hayes did not wake up to silence that felt empty. He woke up to silence that felt warm. He sat up slowly in his old bed, listening. The house was still. The wind had softened. Somewhere, a floorboard creaked as the heater clicked on. Then he remembered. The little girl. Walter pulled on his flannel shirt and stepped quietly into the living room. There, on the couch near the fireplace, Emma was still asleep beneath Margaret's knitted blanket. Her tiny face looked peaceful now, no longer pale with fear. One little hand rested on the old cloth rabbit he had given her the night before. Walter stood there for a long moment. The house looked different with a child in it. The old Christmas tree in the corner, which he had almost forgotten to plug in this year, suddenly looked brighter. The fire in the hearth looked warmer. Even the walls felt less lonely. For 5 years, Walter had moved through this house like a ghost, opening drawers that no one else touched, sitting at tables with empty chairs, speaking only when necessary. But now, in the soft blue light of morning, the house felt alive again. He walked quietly to the kitchen and decided that this morning needed more than black coffee and toast. He opened the old pantry and took out oats, cinnamon, apples, and brown sugar. It was the breakfast Margaret used to make every Christmas week when Daniel was a little boy. Walter hadn't made it in nearly 20 years. As the oatmeal simmered and the smell of cinnamon filled the kitchen, he heard a small voice behind him. "That smells really good." Walter turned. Emma stood in the doorway wrapped in the oversized blanket, her hair messy, her cheeks pink from sleep, and her eyes still heavy. He smiled. "Well, good morning." She rubbed one eye. "Morning." Walter pointed at the stove. "In this house, there's a rule." Emma blinked. "What rule?" He turned off the heat and ladled the oatmeal into a bowl. "No matter how bad the weather is, or how hard the day feels, you always eat a warm breakfast first." Emma stared at him. "That's a real rule?" Walter placed the bowl in front of her and added a few apple slices on top. It was Margaret's rule. Emma looked toward the framed photo of Walter's late wife on the mantel. "The lady in the picture?" Walter nodded. "My wife." Emma studied the picture for a moment, then looked back at him. "She looks kind." Walter's expression softened. "She was." Emma took one bite of the oatmeal and her eyes widened. "This tastes like Christmas." Walter let out a small laugh. "That's probably the cinnamon." For a few minutes the room felt almost normal, almost peaceful. Then Emma's spoon slowed. She looked down at the bowl. "Did they find my mommy?" The question hit Walter like cold air. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "Not yet," he said gently, "but Sheriff Tom is looking for her, and he won't stop until he finds her." Emma nodded, but her little mouth trembled. Walter wanted to promise everything would be okay, but he had lived too long to make promises the world might break. So instead, he said the truest thing he could. "Until then, you're safe here." Emma looked up at him, and for the first time, she believed it. By mid-morning, the knock on the door came. Walter opened it to find Sheriff Tom Bennett and Deputy Lisa Monroe standing on the porch, their coats still dusted with snow. One look at Tom's face told Walter that something important had happened. Emma appeared behind him, clutching the cloth rabbit. Tom stepped inside and removed his hat. "Walter," he said quietly, "we found her mother." Emma gasped. "Mommy?" Deputy Lisa immediately knelt to Emma's level. "Your mommy is alive, sweetheart." Emma's eyes filled with tears instantly. "Is she?" Lisa nodded. "She was found near Miller's Bend, about 2 miles from the car. She was unconscious from the cold, but the search team got to her in time. The doctors say she's stable." Emma burst into tears, not from fear this time, but from relief so strong it shook her whole body. Walter dropped to one knee as she threw herself into his arms. He held her tightly, one hand gently rubbing her back while she cried into his flannel shirt. Sheriff Tom looked away for a second, giving them privacy. After Emma calmed, they sat around the kitchen table. Lisa explained what they knew. Her mother's name was Sarah Collins. She was 29 years old, and she and Emma were driving north from Minneapolis during the storm. Their car had slid off the road. The heater failed. Sarah told Emma to stay in the car while she tried to find help on foot. Somewhere in the storm, Emma had panicked, climbed out, and wandered into the snow. If Walter hadn't seen her. No one at the cable wanted to finish that sentence. Emma wiped her eyes. "Can I see my mommy?" Lisa smiled sadly. "Soon, honey, but she's very weak right now, and the roads are still dangerous. We may need to wait until tomorrow." Emma looked disappointed, but Walter squeezed her hand. "He knows you're safe now, and that matters." Sheriff Tom then turned to Walter. "The hospital social worker says Sarah doesn't have any close family nearby. If you're willing, Emma can stay here one more day until we arrange everything." Walter didn't even hesitate. "She stays." Emma looked up at him and smiled through her tears. That tiny smile hit Walter harder than he expected. By mid-morning, the whole town knew. In a place like Ashford, news traveled faster than weather. First came Mrs. Henderson from 2 houses down, carrying a large pot of homemade chicken soup and pretending she had accidentally made too much. Then came Pete Lawson with a paper bag full of oranges for reasons no one could explain. Then Pastor Reed showed up with coloring books and crayons from the church nursery. By early afternoon, Walter's kitchen table looked like a holiday buffet. Emma sat in the middle of it all, coloring a blue snowman while Eagoltz fussed over her as if she had always belonged there. Mrs. Henderson leaned toward Walter as Emma giggled at Pete, trying to draw a cat that looked more like a potato. "I haven't heard laughter in this house since Margaret was alive," she whispered. Walter looked around the room, at the soup steaming on the counter, at boots piled by the door, at the little girl coloring at his kitchen table, at the old Christmas decorations glowing in the corner. Then he looked at Margaret's photo on the mantel, and quietly, almost to himself, he said, "I know." That afternoon, after the visitors left, Emma followed Walter into the garage. It was his favorite place besides the porch. Tools hung neatly on the wall, old oil cans lined the shelves, an old workbench stood in the center of the room beneath a hanging light, and on that workbench sat something Walter had not touched in months, a half-finished wooden birdhouse. Emma pointed. "What's that?" Walter looked at it. "A birdhouse." "Why didn't you finish it?" Walter shrugged. "I guess I stopped caring." Emma frowned. "But the birds still need a home." Walter stared at her. Then he laughed, really laughed. "You know what? That's a pretty good point." He lifted her onto an old stool and handed her a tiny piece of sandpaper. "All right, Supervisor, let's get to work." For the next hour they sanded the wood together. Emma asked questions faster than Walter could answer. Why do nails bend? Why does wood smell good? Why do old people always keep candy in their pockets? Walter raised an eyebrow. "Old people?" Emma grinned. "Yep." He shook his head. "I'm not that old." Emma giggled. "Yes, you are." He pretended to be offended, and she laughed harder. When the birdhouse was finally smooth enough to paint later, Emma sat back proudly. "It's gonna be the best birdhouse ever." Walter smiled. "I think so too." Then Emma looked at him in a way that was too serious for a child her age. "You feel like a grandpa." Walter's hands stopped moving. For a second, the garage was silent. He turned away and set down the sandpaper so she wouldn't see the tears in his eyes. After a moment, he cleared his throat. "Well, that's might be the nicest thing anyone said to me in a long time." Emma simply smiled. To her, it was the most obvious truth in the world. That evening, the snow started falling again, but softly this time, not like the angry storm from the night before. This snow drifted gently past the windows, quiet and peaceful, like the town itself was exhaling. Walter finally plugged in the Christmas tree. The colored lights blinked to life, reflecting across the living room walls. Emma clapped. "It's beautiful." Walter chuckled. "It's a little crooked." "That makes it better," Emma said.